Do you want to have the most effective, efficient scouting network in Football Manager to pick up the best Wonderkids and the best players in the world? If so, stick with us in this video as I show you how to master scouting in FM23. Hi everyone, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and as mentioned today I'll be showing you guys how to master scouting in FM23. We've got a lot to get into. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour covering many different aspects, including some of the new things that they added to FM23. But I'll be talking about scouting as a whole, some of the most effective methods, and also some tips and tricks that you might not have known. So stick with us and hopefully you'll find this useful. Before we start though, as mentioned in yesterday's video, the channel was hacked on Sunday and now we're a bit unsure as to whether videos are going to push out the way that we expect. So if you guys can show your support to us by smashing the like button and hitting the subscribe button, dropping a comment, whatever it is below to help with the algorithm, we would greatly appreciate it. Just to quickly note, we'll be using my Leicester save to demonstrate scouting in this video. If you want to watch a series where I manage Leicester in this save, it's going on my channel currently, which you can find linked in the description. Check out the first couple of episodes if you want to, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And subscribe if you haven't already as we get close to 11k over there. But with that being said, scouting. First things first, let's cover the basics. Now, the people that scout for players, the guys that go out there and find the best players possible, are of course your scouts. And if you want to find them and improve on them, head to your staff section. Here you'll see how many scouts you're allowed. If you want more scouts, you can go out and find them or place an advert. In terms of what's important for a scout, you're looking for a good judge of player potential and ability, as well as adaptability. If you don't know, adaptability will determine how quick a scout can adapt to a new environment, and we'll speak about how that can come into play a little bit later. But in general, look for scouts that have high levels of these three highlighted attributes and you're golden. Now, what can you do with these scouts? Well, of course, you can scout players. I know, crazy information, who would have thought? But how much your scouts can actually go out there and scout is determined by your scouting budget. Now, if I click on this, you can see exactly what this does. This scouting budget will be used to pay for senior, youth packages and any individual scouting trips outside of your permitted scouting range, and you can allocate money towards this budget with this simple slider here. It comes out of your transfer budget. But what does it mean, players outside of our permitted scouting range? Well, that is anyone outside of the, guess what, scouting range section that we can see here. Now, this is broken down into packages. The one at the bottom is the worst package and the one at the top is the best and will allow you to see more players. It's all pretty self-explanatory. The more you pay, the more of an area that you're able to see, and hopefully the more players that you're able to pick up. But if you only had England selected, let's say, yes, don't show this message again, let's choose England for this example, and we wanted to scout someone in Ghana, we're going to have to use some of the money out of a scouting budget, and the scouting budget will also determine the cost that we need to pay for the package. So the world package is £360,000 a year. Our scouting budget is £390,000. So all works out there, and now you understand the finances and the structure behind how to scout. But what is the best ways to scout and what are the different methods? Well, here we're in our scouting overview section where it's basically pulling through recommendations for all of our different scouting focuses, and I'll show you how to make them soon. Here you get to see the player, their potential scouting value, how much the scouts recommend them, and the knowledge of that player. But my suggestion, and I think many experienced players would say this as well, don't just trust what your scouts say about people. The scout report isn't based on purely talent. Obviously, they're giving Jeremy Pino an A+, and that is because he is an awesome player. But sometimes they can give a harsh rating to a good player, and that's because the scouts aren't just considering on-the-pitch talent and attributes, they're considering how likely they are to adapt to your team. Also, if they'll be homegrown at the club, if they fit into your board's principles, they're considering all of that, not just player quality, which is of course very handy and very useful, but don't be completely fooled by them. But in general, yes, the better the scout says a player is, the more likely they are to be an ideal sign-in for your save. And also you can see the scouting knowledge here. The higher the scouting knowledge of a player, the more of his attributes that you'll know, and the easier you'll be able to judge whether that player will be a good fit for you. Now, I have some recruitment focuses here already, which is a technically new thing to FM23. It's kind of just been packaged in a new way, I would say, but we'll get to that soon. The first part is the scouting center section. Now, this lists everybody that's been scouted recently, the same way that we could see them all here in our overview and make a decision based off of them, whether you want to disregard them completely or ask your scouts to scout further. If you want the screen solely for that, it's the scouting center screen. Now, the first tip/trick in this video that a lot lot of people don't realise is you can switch between seeing these cards and going through them that way. At the bottom here, we can make a decision on the player. If you hover over it, it will tell you exactly what each of those decisions mean, but you can also have it in a list format if that is what you prefer. But how do we go about getting these report cards coming back in the first place? Well, that can either come from you just finding a player and deciding to scout them. Let me take an example here. I don't know, let's say Kylian Mbappe, right? We're not going to sign him for Leicester. If you wanted to scout him, you would go to report and then fully scout player or scout player for 1 week. Your scout would then go away and give you a report on him. But what if you don't want to find each player individually and get your scouts to do it? Well, that's where the recruitment focus comes into play. If we go onto recruitment focuses, you can see I've got a few already. One where we're looking for a goalkeeper, one where we're looking for players in the Premier League that could fit a certain criteria. I've got to be honest, I haven't been scouting the way that I should in this save, and you can see we've got a load of different Sky Bet Championship focuses for pretty much no reason. We've also got one here that I've made myself looking for youth players, which has been particularly useful. But how can you go about creating one of these focuses? Well, guess what? You're going to hit this create recruitment focus section. From there, we're going to be able to assign some filters basically on what we want the scouts to look for. Now, you might be looking for a player in general that's just a good player for your team, or maybe you're looking specifically for a striker, a goalkeeper, a defensive midfielder under the age of 21 who's also playing in England. All of these things we can narrow down. The first part is which position we want to scout for. Now, if you're looking for a specific role, we can do that. Or if you're looking for literally anything, you can click any position from tactic, or if you want to be even broader, you can go to your tactic here, click any, and then scout any position from tactic, and that will scout anyone from any of these roles. But for me, let's say I'm looking for a defensive midfielder in my 4-2-4 tactic. So I'm going to click defensive midfielder, and as you can see, it already brings through the role that that player plays, roaming playmaker. If you wanted to look for something else, then we can do. But let's say we're looking for a roaming playmaker. You can then name it what you want. Let's say we're calling it roaming, and from there we can begin to add our restrictions that our scouts are going to focus on. So are we looking for someone on transfer, loan, or transfer and loan? Well, let's say I'm only looking for people interested in a transfer. Now, I might be looking for someone for the future here as opposed to someone to help us right now, so I'm going to say we're looking for someone with at least 2-star current ability but a minimum potential ability of 3.5 stars who is younger than 23. You can then set your priority for this assignment. If you just want it to be an ongoing assignment that keeps going forever, then feel free, but chances are once you find that roaming playmaker, you don't want to scout for another one. I prefer to use ongoing scouting assignments if you're looking for something in general, like a youth player with a lot of potential, and I'll show you that in a second. But first, for this one, we'll call it a standard priority. If you really needed some recommendations coming, maybe you've only got a week before the deadline, set it as top and your scouts will assign that as the first priority. We can then scout a specific area or league or nation. Now, this is where something comes into play from last year. Region scouting used to seemingly be the best way to go, but nowadays I'm not so sure. I don't think it works as effectively as before. You used to basically send a scout to, say, Northern Africa, and they would bring back some great players and just stay there forever. But now I'm not so sure it works as well because they spend a lot of time picking up rubbish players, basically. So instead of saying scout, I don't know, South America North or South America South, instead just go ahead to the nations section and pick a few from South America that you really want to scout. Let's say Argentina and Brazil, but in this case, I want to scout people from the French division, so I'm going to click that. Now that I've selected that, the game can either assign me a random scout or we can pick our own one. Now, having a scout with good knowledge of France is going to be very beneficial, but if not, we want someone who can adapt to the French area quickly without knowing the area and get reports back to us faster. And to find that, you'll be looking for the person with the most adaptability. Therefore, I might want to send Callum Smithson out there to find me a roaming playmaker, but this is exactly how you set up a recruitment focus. You can hit confirm and then they'll come back with some suggestions. The way that they have with goalkeepers here, they'll do the exact same for roaming playmaker as time goes on. If you want a more general search though, if you're not looking for a specific role, then this kind of thing might be what you want. This is what I call my youth focus. Here, my scouts are looking for anyone that fits my tactic with potential, and it's an ongoing scouting priority, which I did mention earlier. And from there, over time, they bring through different reports of players. They'll tell me which ones they're currently scouting. And as you can see in this goalkeeping section, every now and then you'll get one that says near matches. This is where the scouts will give you players that don't exactly fit your scouting criteria, but still could be a good sign-in. For example, they're not completely ruling out Maximiano here, but they're saying he could be an okay transfer target if needed. So we can take a look at him, see if we want him, and make up our mind there. So now you know how to scout an individual player and make a recruitment focus. But let's say you've just found the world's best Wonderkid and you want to make sure he is as good as we think before we sign him. Let's take Lovro Zavanic here. Let's say we really wanted him, but our scout report was taking ages to come back. Well, this is where your scouting priorities will come into place. If we scout Lovro here, even though we've already done it, let's just imagine it as an example and go down to the scout priority section, you can then chop and change the order of how much you want your scouts to look in for something. Here's Lovro Zavanic, look, he's right at the bottom in 15th place, but I want his scout report as soon as possible. I could drag him all the way to the top and he then becomes my main priority. The scouts will go ahead and get that done as soon as possible. This is something that a lot of people won't know about, and it's very useful if you need a quick report. Maybe you've got a week until deadline day and you just need to know if you should sign that player or not. There's also a handy section called the scouting coverage section. This will show you where scouts are currently based and you want as broad of a range as possible. We know that we've got scouts in England looking at the championship, and we've just sent someone out to France looking for a roaming playmaker. And you can see France and the UK are the areas that are highlighted here. Also on this section, you can check out world knowledge to see how much your scouts know about different areas of the world. Now, the better your knowledge of a region, the easier it will be for your scouts to get quicker reports from that area. And if you have no knowledge, your way to get that up is to send scouts over there. You can see supposedly we've got an exceptional knowledge of South Europe, but let's say South America South, which features some pretty nice countries that can develop Wonderkids. We've got minimal knowledge, so we might want to get our scouting knowledge up. And that's where, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and do region scouting. But I think it's much better this year to try and focus in on specific nations to build up your scouting knowledge. I think that's the best method this year. That way you'll get the most effective reports and cut out a lot of the rubbish. Yes, you might miss out on one gem here or there, but it will also negate the amount of trash that comes into the scouting report section, which makes your life a lot easier. When I actually sent someone on region scouting right at the start of this save, and it took them ages before they found anyone of use because they were basically looking in all of the worst sections of that region first, never returning anyone, and I thought the scouting just wasn't working. It turns out they just weren't finding anyone of my criteria because they were looking in such a broad range and not in specific nations that I wanted them to go to. So make sure when you're setting up your recruitment focuses, obviously, if you really want to do region scouting, go ahead, but I would definitely suggest focusing in on a nation instead, as we showed earlier when we searched in France. So now we know the fundamentals of scouting in FM23, the finances behind it, and also some of the different and best methods that you can use to find players. But before we finish, I'm going to quickly cover a few tips and tricks that you might want to do if you're someone who manually searches for players. Now, a lot of people will do this. It's in the players section, and then if you go to players in range, basically you can actually filter yourself every single player in your scouting range, which I think is less realistic than maybe it should be, but everyone plays in their own way. So of course, do your own thing. If that's what you enjoy, go for it that way. Now, most people will know this, but this section will show every player within your scouting range. You can tick on and off to see if those players would be interested. So supposedly, these are all the players in our database who'd be willing to join with at least a doubtful transfer willingness to come to our club. But let's narrow it down even further with some tips and tricks. Now, again, a lot of you will know this part also, but you can use the search feature here to narrow down your search. Maybe you're looking for a certain age and whatnot, but there's a few things that people ignore that I think is super beneficial, one of which is this box here, find similar players too. We're managing Leicester here, and let's say Ndidi is getting old and he's got interest that he might be leaving in the summer and whatnot. We need to find a Wilfred Ndidi replacement. Well, fear no more. We're going to type in Wilfred Ndidi up here, or just Ndidi, and players with Ndidi in the name will come up. We, of course, want Wilfred. If we tick that button, there we go. It's going to look for anybody that is similar to Wilfred Ndidi based on his role and also some specific attributes. Now, I would suggest turning this off. The reason I do this is because then it will return players who might not necessarily play Ndidi's position but could do in the future, and it's basically searching for anyone that has some key attributes that Ndidi has: tackling, work rate, natural fitness, blah blah blah. As you can see on the left, there's 105 players in our range, but let's narrow that down by turning up all of these attributes by 1 in one go. That brings it down to 23. Let's say I really want a special tackler, we can up that by a couple. Okay, we're down to 5 players, so let's go take a look at them. It's going to be a very wide range of players, mind you. We've got Kante, Wanyama, a guy who plays in the Eredivisie called Jota, and then 2 players that look like they're not going to be good enough for our side, but again, you might be able to find some real talent here. Last quick tip and trick, I mentioned this in a separate video before, but so many of you loved it, and in case you didn't catch it, if you want to find people that would definitely get a work permit at your club, you can do that in your scouting section here. If we go down to add condition transfer, you can see work permit chance. Here you can narrow it down to find people who are likely to get work permit. So I want to look for people who have work permit likely. If we hit that, it's narrowed it down to 15 people and we can go from there. So that's a great way if you want to scout manually. And finally, if you come down to scouted players, you can see every player that you have a scout report on within the game. In this case, we've got 1,791 players that we've scouted. Let's look at those that have the highest recommendation possible. And up there is Harry Kane. Who would have guessed he's a good footballer? Bukayo Saka, Evan Nilsson and Kenneth Taylor. Let's go ahead, try and sign Kenneth Taylor. So don't worry if you're one of those people like me sometimes when you get a bit trigger happy and you accidentally click the red cross on someone you actually wanted to find out about, you can still go and find them in that section there. So there you go, that's everything covered about scouting. Hopefully you found this useful, some tips and tricks, some of the best methods. Also, don't diss my scouting in this Leicester save. Clearly I haven't been doing it very well and I now need to get right on top of it. But hopefully you have enjoyed the video. If you have, smash that like button for us guys, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day and goodbye.